Chinese President Xi Jinping on March the 19th sent a congratulatory message to Russian President-elect Vladimir Putin 2 days after Putin congratulated Xi Jinping on his re-election as Chinese president. Xi Jinping said in the message that currently China-Russia relationship is at the best level in history. The relationship sets an example for building a new type of international relations among major countries. Since taking office in 2012, Chinese President Xi Jinping has met his Russian counterpart more than 20 times. Behind the frequent meetings is a special partnership and massive shifts in the world's geopolitical landscape. However, the two countries also differ in domestic priorities, and critics say deeper economic cooperation has lagged behind political ones. So what is special about this partnership? How should we evaluate the progress or the lack thereof in concrete projects? And how can the two countries coordinate in creating a multipolar world? Welcome to a special edition of The Point with me, Lu Xin, coming to you from Moscow, Russia. I'm joined by Professor Anna Kireeva, Associate Professor from the Department of Asian and African Studies at the Moscow State Institute of International Relations. To my left, Mr. Sergey Sanakoev, President of the Russian Chinese Analytical Center. And to my right, our long-term friend.
I'm Peter Lavelle from RT, and my program is CrossTalk.
Thank you all very much for joining us on this very special occasion. I would like to start with China's relationship with Russia. Mr. Sanakoev, how would you describe the current status of this relationship? Where are we at this moment?
At the top, as you already told about the opinion of Mr. Xi Jinping, the same opinion is in Russia, that we have the comprehensive strategic partnership. And our relationship today is unexampled for any kind of relations between any countries or any time of history of these countries.
How come? Why is it possible? What has happened?
Why it's possible? First of all, we are neighbors, so we should understand this. We have the most long border in the land border, I mean, more than 4,000 kilometers. And we have very close mythology. And when in 90s we just begin the new relations from Russia and China, we understand that we have very good base for this such kind of relationship. We made absolutely unexampled mechanism of intergovernmental relationship. We have more than 5 intergovernmental commissions, and they are sectoral and they are territorial also, absolutely different, and a lot of subcommission. So we have all these mechanisms on every area of our relationship.
Right. Peter, let me come to you. Why do you think China and Russia has been able to come closer at a particularly faster pace, especially since 2014?
Well, it's really interesting because if you look at Western literature about the relationship of these two countries, it's always called a marriage of convenience. And this is this Western mentality that Russia deep down wants to join the West, and once under certain circumstances they will do it. They will basically cave and join the West. And this term, a marriage of convenience, it is so outdated. Because I was very critical of President Yeltsin during his time, during the terrible 90s here, but he made a very fundamentally positive decision with his Chinese counterparts, particularly when you look at the volatility in Central Asia. Instead of competing, they decided to cooperate. It was a very important move. Also, since 2014, I would even go further back, maybe in 2008, when we had Western-inspired conflict behind Mikhail Saakashvili's decision to attack South Ossetia. China was on Russia's side at the United Nations, on the Security Council. And it's, so we go from kind of a marriage of convenience is that, well, I mean, the Obama administration started sanctioning China over trade. A lot of people think only Trump is doing that, but it's happening. It happened then. And now that, China and Russia are both kind of the target of Western anxiety in many ways. And this brings the two countries together. It's a natural fit in many ways, but as you pointed out in your introduction, there's a lot of kinks you have to iron out.
Anna, how would you describe the relationship between China and Russia if it is not a marriage of convenience or if it is not because we were both kind of cornered by the West? What drives it together?
Probably we should start with the respect for sovereignty, principle of non-interference into domestic affairs, and of course one of the bases has been the vision to a multipolar order, or probably even better to a polycentric regional, to a polycentric world order, with Russia and China as one of the leading centers of power. Of course, as analysts, we should say that it is also that two countries at least partially support each other vis-à-vis the West. Probably, I would not call Russia-China partnership as an anti-Western one. I do believe that there are shared interests that go beyond simple opposition to the West, but still, there is a common opposition to unilateral actions by the United States, and also the two countries really enjoy probably strategic partnership in the fact that they would not support the third parties against each other, and this is very important because essentially it makes it impossible to encircle Russia or China when we enjoy this partnership.
Still staying with you, I mean, in the most latest national security strategy released by the United States, Russia and China are said to attempt to challenge American power, security and prosperity. How do you think the two countries are going to cooperate or cope together, this kind of categorization in the next 5 years?
We are already having joint military exercises both on land and on the sea, so of course it is going to be enhanced. And 2 years ago, actually in 2016, for the first time Russia and China held joint military exercises, computer simulation of the center of ballistic missile defense, and this actually is kind of a precedent in bilateral relations.
And I agree completely with you. It doesn't have to be just on a bilateral, it has to be multilateral. And that you get synergies out of that there. Because I do believe when you look at Russia's discriminate against the financial markets in the West, they can go someplace else. You can always go someplace else.
Certainly.
Right. And that's why this whole...
That's why we need multipolar world.
Well, that's why. Well, it's going to be a reality. How we get there, it's you know, historically speaking, when a power or two powers in conjunction confronts the established order, you have the established order has three options. First option is to just accept it. Okay. The second one is negotiate with it, and then the third one is war. Okay.
What do you think is going to happen
Well,
this time?
we're heading for number 3, I'm afraid.
You think you're heading?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely,
right.
absolutely.
Still, China and Russia has been trying to adjust, let's say, the international order which has been established since the end of the Second World War. In that effort, how do you see China and Russia different and similar?
Well, I think it's very slightly. I would kind of almost turn it upside down. I would say because of the end of the Cold War, we got this unipolar moment, and basically, in many ways, tore up the settlement of 1945. And replaced it with Pax Americana and its allies. What Russia and China are saying is, we need to go back to the roots. We need to go back to the United Nations Charter. They're the these two countries, China and Russia, continually look at their diplomatic rhetoric. They're constantly making reference to the United Nations Charter. Okay, about non-interference in other countries and not doing things unilaterally. You know, I think that a real multipolar world will actually go back to look at the ideas that were generated in 1945.
Do you think at this particular moment it's possible at all? It seems that U.S. President Donald Trump doesn't really care about how it looks on paper or you know.
Well, I mean, I think our colleagues can actually address this better than I can. I mean, there's a very rich literature about the world without the West, and this is essentially what's happening. is that, I'm sure if we look at, our Chinese colleagues, and then you read that, what are they doing now? They're going to Somalia now, and Yemen now? I mean, and what China's doing is building itself up, okay? The West fights these ridiculous, wasteful, criminal wars, and they actually hurt themselves in every possible sense, economically, financially, reputationally, and I think this process of the world not using the dollar, looking for different trade, okay, and it's happening. It's happening.
That's what I want to say, Peter. We know why they are doing this, because they are trying to keep dollar in power.
Right.
That's only idea here, and we are doing another thing. We give the alternative. That's, by the way, that's how I understand the idea of Mr. Xi Jinping, who says, and now it's put it in the constitution of the country, that let's construct the community of the common destiny. And that is very important, because if we will think, what does it mean? What does it mean from the point of view of the results of the Second World War? Why they talked about a very similar speech on the United Nations stage? This is a particular question what we are talking about. That's why I say that now the initiatives from Russia and China on the international agenda makes this world more safe.
Yeah, because when you look at a common destiny like that, I think it was brilliant, actually.
Yes.
Because then you don't really think about who's going to be the next president of the United States, because it's irrelevant in a way.
Absolutely.
Okay? Because you have a vision and you're working towards it, and then you have these ups and downs, and I mean, the United States is a very difficult country to understand right now because it's a very difficult president. Okay, but when we have this common destiny, it shows you over a certain time period, midterm, long-term, what you want to achieve. That creates stability.
Anna, do you see things in this light?
I agree with the perspective that the United States are still trying to retain its hegemony, what some people call as a concept, or probably its strategic preeminence, or like we can also say maybe not a hegemony, but a kind of being a dominant power in the world order. But I think that most Russian specialists, at least, do believe that the world is already polycentric, and one of the key things here is that world institutions and world governance is not actually representing how the world has changed in practice. And I believe that this perspective is generally also shared by China. And here Russia and China would probably see more eye to eye to reforming existing institutions. One of the trickiest things here, although, can be if Russia and China are really going to negotiate each other like equal partners in this forming world order and institutions. And this is rather a difficult thing, I guess.
At this particular moment, there are some Western analysts who are saying China has the upper hand in this partnership with Russia.
I'm speaking about that.
That China is leading the course of the development. Do you so you have that kind of you share that kind of position, or do you see it differently?
Actually, we should look at the positions of the two major powers, and Russia and China. And if we look at the economic positions and the economic capacity, it's quite natural that China has got here the upper hand if we compare China with Russia. And especially since the rift with the West of Russia and Russia's foreign policy, we could see that, of course, Russia has been much more interested and much more in need of China than vice versa. And this is again quite natural. And here probably one of the major things for Russia is a concern that China has been focusing more and more on the United States, and that it is more prone to negotiating the conditions of the...
But before we talk about China being more prone to cooperate with or interact with the United States, I think diplomatically and geopolitically, Russia has a very strong position still. And I don't think on that sense China has the upper hand. Peter, how do you look at it?
Economics.
But I think that's what this relationship is all about.
Shall we look at it from this perspective?
Well, of course, that's a Western perspective, and some Russians feel that way, obviously, too. But I mean, this relationship is about a process. And I think that's a confidence-building process, okay? I mean, Russia has enormous natural resources, okay, which of course Chinese would like to be able to use. But Russia doesn't want to be just selling natural resources. So essentially what they want is they want factories and businesses, infrastructure that they work on together where they both get the same benefits, okay? So it isn't one-sided. But no, of course, I mean, everyone knows China's got a lot more money and it has really deep pockets to be able to do that. But it has to spend it very, very wisely. And I think because of Russia's experience and its relation, and we look at the region here, and its long historic relationship with the region, Russia and China are obvious partners. The thing is not who has the upper hand, it's the process of how they do it together.
Yes, it's very important, by the way. You know, the country which was former Russia, Soviet Union, when it was constructed the relationship with China in the 50s of the last ages, constructed more than 150 heavy industrial plants in China. That was a big, good base for this development of China. And that particular time, this relationship, they call it that the Soviet Union was older brother.
Yeah, right. That was back then. I remember that very well.
But the difference is, and that's really important, but that was ideology. We don't have
yes,
that.
absolutely right.
We don't have that.
That's why I want to say this, because now they say, somebody said, so China became an old brother. Who will be older? Now, let me say about my opinion. It's not serious to speak about this in 21st century.
I agree.
Absolutely. It's why you don't believe about the equal relationship? Why not? So this topic is specially given to us from the West to make this just a relationship most tough.
Divide
us. So we shouldn't take this provocation.
No, go ahead.
What I would really like to add is that Russia and China both have taken a lot of steps to coordinate their foreign policy strategies.
Absolutely right.
And I think no other great powers have actually taken these steps who are not former allies, at least, like a junior or a senior partner, as we can see, with the United States and some other countries, for example, to some extent, probably even now. Of course, it dates back to the Cold War, but still, we do have some reminiscence here. But Russia and China have actually built a lot of confidence in this regard. And probably Russia and China are interested still in discussing together what could be the future of world order and regional order in East Asia. And Russia will not find this, such a partner in the United States. Right. And China will also, is very unlikely to find such a partner with the United States that would like to negotiate the form of the world order.
No,
it's a good friend, it's a pal.
Yeah, but the thing is, you're absolutely right, because if a Chinese deal with the United States would imperil in one form or another China's room for maneuver and its sovereignty. Now, the Russia-China relationship, you don't have to worry about those two issues, because both are very, very sensitive. And I think that's why it actually works, because who has the upper hand and the lower hand? No, but the most important, at the center of it all is sovereignty and mutual respect.
By the way, this particular year, China is the chair of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and we will see the summit of this organization in June in Qingdao. I assure you right now that we will hear and we will see very important declaration from this organization this particular year. It would be very important for
again, this comes back to the discussion we had last year about the BRICS. Right, we have this grouping of people, again, similar to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization in terms of the percentage of the people represented. We are much bigger than.
But the most important thing about these organizations that we're talking about is they're not mirroring what has happened in the West. Okay, like the G7. okay? Because we talked about this, should the BRICS countries imitate? And I said no, because there's one hegemon in the G7, okay? But when when we have the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, you don't have a hegemon. You have big countries and small countries, but you have mutual respect, okay? And this is why I'm very adamant that China and Russia and countries in this part of the world don't duplicate the same mistakes, because then you'll have one country on top, and that one country's interests will be paramount at the expense of all others.
Right. So looking ahead, what kind of difficulties or what kind of better work China and Russia have to do among themselves to further improve their relationship? Where do you think they need to do better so that they don't repeat the mistakes that we talked about, so that our partnership is more solid, that we are able to coordinate and face the difficult challenges, and possibly sanctions against Russia more in the future? Trade
well, I think what's most important is, and I think we agree that's in the very beginning. I mean, from the summit of politics, everything is great. Okay, it's super. Okay, we have two leaders, two of the most important leaders in the world that get along very well. They've met 20 times. But it needs to be business. It has to be trade. It has to be people to people. It's really the nuts and bolts of a relationship. I mean, it's going to have to be literally a top-down operation here, okay? And we have a format out there. We have a trajectory that's and I think that these other layers have to be added on.
I also can say that we should increase economical cooperation in space, in nuclear, in infrastructure construction, or other things, cultural development, etc. But let me say, from the point of view of knowledge, is what we're doing now in our Russian-Chinese relationship. We should keep moving. That's all.
Yeah. Okay, never. But another thing, do you think people need to really have managed their expectations as well? Because another question from some Western analysis has been the expectations have been too high, that this could hamper the long-term development of bilateral ties. Do you see any potential problem in
I live here in Moscow, and it's a very modern, very developed city. But if you go into the east, I mean, it's virgin land, and so much needs to be done. And I think that's one of the recipes for success, because so much can be done. Okay. Absolutely. And again, I just keep going back to my theme of, as long as there's a mutual respect of sovereignty, because there's population pressure and things like that, and that's an issue that has to be talked about, because you have a relatively low density of population in Russia's east, and China's obviously has a very high density. That's going to have to be managed right there, and it has to be done with mutual respect. So, because that's what the West will always say, is that the Chinese will take you over if you get into bed with them. No, you hear it all the time. They hear it all the time.
I also hear it.
Hear it all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, from the Chinese perspective, it's just unthinkable that people would speak of us like that. And this actually leads to one more topic which I've always been very interested in. And I think it's vitally important, is the fact that when we talk about China, when we talk about Russia, the China and Russia that we know is different from the China and Russia that is described in the international media. And I think that is the biggest problem the world has.
Just like we go full circle, a marriage of convenience. That's exactly how they look at it, and it is not. It's a mutually accepted relationship, and it's a relationship that is being fueled on and given a life of its own because of Western hostility.
And the international narrative that is dominated by Western voices, we have to acknowledge that has described Russia or described Chinese or Russian people or the Chinese people in such a stereotypical way that it is impossible for anybody to even try to understand the other, the Russians or the Chinese.
Because what happens is that it's this teleology that has come out of the West for the last 500 years, is that the world will become more and more like us. Okay, it's a messianic view. It is a view of the end of history. I mean, the Cold War And the end of the Cold War gave that impetus there. Francis Fukuyama, you know, his thesis, which is complete nonsense, okay? And the reason why we get these caricatures and stereotypes is because the West is being confronted with something that it never could possibly imagine. And that's why we get demonization. We have the yellow peril that came from the United States in the 19th century and early 20th century. And it's because of these types of things. It is because there is a fundamental shift going on in the global order, and you know, if you're a top dog, you're not going to give up very easily. You're not going to say, hey, you know, let's all be equals and friends. If you've lived your entire existence, your entire definition of yourself is about domination and hegemony, you're not going to give it up easily.
So I think it's so easy to understand what's happening in this field. Mr. Putin, in his speech right now, winning speech, said that we have very clear position. We should respect each other and the position of any country. It's so easy. Why? I cannot understand why USA, which the history of it is just several hundreds of years, can teach China or Russia, which has the thousands years of history, and it's a different civilization. I cannot understand why.
Because they think they found the ultimate
so
answer to things.
Not understandable.
So they have found the end of history.
But
really
when I think about it now, and I know a lot of things about it, I would say that we are under deep informational impact. And this is the most important thing. They already are having war with us by information, and they are going to win in this field because they cannot win in another field.
Or they will at least try to win.
And so we should make more such kind of programs. And we will.
Oh, you watched our BRICS format, because that's exactly what I said. Exactly that.
Anna.
Our Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov mentioned that we should engage into building a post-Western world. And again, we could see here what we could develop together with different countries. And it wouldn't mean, of course, that the Western countries would be excluded from this order. Of course, they are supposed to be a part of it as well, but just the reason that it should be, again, more or less equal. And also all major states should be engaged in formulating this order. And probably this is a very good thing that Russia and China should engage in debating into more detail together. What I think is also very important, but we haven't actually touched upon that, is building a regional cooperation between the regions of Russia and the regions of China. This was probably more your topic.
By the way, you know that this year, the next year,
and next year is going to be
interregional.
Yes. And here I think this sphere again, even inside the economic cooperation, which has been lagging behind, it is one of the weakest points. And here we should really like to see more momentum because naturally we should have much better cooperation between the regions here. So probably we should like to have some specific steps made by both Russia and China.
Right, indeed. So China and Russia both have to do our own homework better, develop ourselves, more balanced development, more comprehensive development, have more interaction, more integration, both on the national level, international level, and regional level, people-to-people level, and finally we need to really help the world understand who we are and why we do things in a certain way. So thank you very much for participating in this wonderful panel of discussion. I'm so honored. My guests have been Peter Lavelle, host of CrossTalk on RT, Anna Kireeva, Associate Professor of the Department of Asian and African Studies and Research Fellow at the Center for Comprehensive Chinese Studies and Research Projects of the Moscow Institute of International Relations, and last but not least, Sergey Sanakoev, President of the Russian Chinese Analytical Center. And that is it for this special edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin, coming to you from Moscow, Russia. As always, you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle The Point with Alex. Download the application called CGTN to watch the show on your mobile devices, or go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point. Thanks for watching. You've got the point.